Welcome, traveler of the night. Crescent moon tonight, we step into the hushed whispers of the fields, where mysteries are carved not in stone, but in the living skin of the earth. Across golden wheat, under starlit skies, circles of impossible perfection appear, spirals too vast, too precise, as though written by the hand of the cosmos itself. They rise in silence, overnight, leaving behind no footprints, no voices, only patterns that seem to hum with hidden meaning. Are these signs the language of the heavens? Messages from beyond the stars? Or echoes of an ancient power buried beneath the soil? As the wind bends the fields and shadows stretch long, we will follow the path of the spiral, into the unknown. Sheaf of rice sparkles prepare to wander through the story of the crop circles, a riddle that has haunted humankind for centuries, and perhaps, for eternity. In the darkness of the vast fields, when the full moon hung high like a silver eye watching over the world, strange lines began to appear, winding on the golden rice. No one heard the footsteps, nor saw the hand that drew them, only knowing that when the morning dew cleared, the mysterious circles lay there, complete and silent, like the imprint of an invisible power carved into the ground. The wind rustled through the rice stalks, whispering like ancient prayers. The farmers were stunned, their eyes fixed on the zigzag pattern spreading out like waves. Some trembled and whispered, "This is the language of heaven." Others quickly made signs, afraid that it was the footprints of darkness. But whatever it was, everyone knew, this was not the work of a human waking up in the middle of the night. On the edge of the village, a child woke up, looking out at the fields through a small window. It saw green flashes like giant fireflies gliding across the rice fields, then disappearing. A faint, distant song rang in its head like an echo from the ground. The child held his breath, his small hands clutching the blanket, but his eyes remained fixed on the night, where the shadows were moving. The old people said that since ancient times, the rice fields had been the intersection between the human world and the invisible world. Some said it was the hand of the wind, others said it was the mark of wandering souls looking for a way back to their home planet. But no one knew for sure, only strange drum beats were heard at night from underground, then stopped when the rooster crowed at the third watch. Another night, the circles appeared again, more complex this time, giant petals rotating around a center like the wheel of the universe. People flocked to the fields, sitting in circles, no one daring to step into the middle. Their eyes were wide open, as if expecting the shapes to explain themselves. But the fields responded only with the wind, with the rustling of the rice like 1,000 small voices gradually fading away. In the house at the end of the village, an old blind man sat leaning against the door, listening. He could not see, but he heard the change in the wind, heard the cracking of the rice like someone plucking the strings of a giant guitar. "They are back," he whispered. And no one knew who they were. That night, the sky was bright for a moment, as if someone had lit a giant torch in the sky. Then everything returned to normal. But the next morning, in the fields, a new circle appeared, 10 times larger than before, the patterns intertwined like a psalm without words. The rice was pressed to the ground, but did not break, the stalks remained intact, as if bowing to an invisible force. The villagers slept less and less. They heard footsteps around the house in the middle of the night, a soft knock on the door, whispers close to their ears even though no one was there. The dogs howled all night, then suddenly fell silent as if someone had covered their mouths. The birds avoided flying across the fields, circling far away, screaming in panic. Someone decided to stay awake, carrying a torch to the middle of the field, waiting to see what would happen. But when morning came, people only found the torch extinguished, and the man had disappeared. In the middle of the field, a new circle was carved, the center of which was where the torch lay. People began to call it a sign, a message sent down to those brave enough to read it. But no one could read it. Every night, the wind brought new shapes, as quiet as a breath. And the whole village, each person, understood that they were living in a book not written in words, but in grass, in rice, and in the silence of the night. The night crawled through the village like a black snake, its scales glistening with dew. At the edge of the field, the rice stalks bowed their heads, whispering to each other in a language only the wind could understand. In the sky, the crescent moon lay tilted like a sickle someone had forgotten, cutting a fragile line into the darkness. In the center of the new circles, young grass is hidden under a layer of flat rice like a green mirror, and in that mirror, whoever dares to look down sees their own face stretched and broken, as if time is looking back. The child who had seen the green light stood on the edge of the field, barefoot, his toes touching the edge of a circle. He heard clearly a melody that came from nowhere but everywhere, from the stalks of rice, from the soil, from the underground water. The melody was a spiral, circling around itself, like a snake that had just shed its skin and was eating its old shell. He reached out, trying to touch the air. The air was cold like rain-soaked glass. Suddenly a warm hand was placed on his shoulder, his mother's. "Come in," the woman said softly, as if afraid to break something as thin as an eggshell. The child obediently nodded, but as he turned away, he felt a light glance at the back of his neck. Not heavy, not threatening, just a presence. In the tea shop at the entrance to the village, the oil lamp was closed, the smoke from the kitchen smelled of burning straw. Several men sat slumped under the lamplight, their voices scratched like ropes rubbing against poles. "Last night," said one, "I saw deer standing in a row at the edge of the woods. Their eyes were bright as silver buttons, but they did not run. They looked at the fields, just as we do." Another replied, "What do deer know?" Then, lowering his voice, "Or perhaps they know better than we do." All fell silent, letting the words fall to the ground like a seed that does not know when it will sprout. The blind old man sat on the porch, his ears like dry leaves still hearing the sound of rain in the dry season. He asked his grandson to lead him to the edge of the field, sitting right at the threshold of the largest whirlpool. He placed his palm on the flattened rice, not touching the ground, just resting on the cold air coming out. "Here," he whispered, "the night has a different breathing rhythm. It breathes in when we sleep, and breathes out when the rooster crows. The sound of the drum under the ground. Do you hear it?" The grandson tilted his head, at first only hearing the sound of grass rubbing against each other, then suddenly realized, something like a distant, regular, not loud rhythm, tum, tum, tum. Like the heartbeat of an animal sleeping in the field, too loud for anyone to see. The news of the torchbearer's disappearance did not dissipate in the morning. It wandered, clinging to every story, growing larger like a rolling snowball. The wife of the deceased placed a bowl of porridge under the porch, changing the bowl every night, not calling the name, not praying, just placing it. After 7 nights, the 8th bowl of porridge was still warm in the morning, despite the cold night wind. People touched the bowl's rim and drew back, as if touching the tears of fire. One night, thunder rumbled softly even though the sky was cloudless. The rice bent down, forming a giant lotus petal, each petal overlapping the other in such perfect circles that the human eye felt confused. Children ran around the outer edge, stepping on their own shadows as if stepping on a school of fish swimming in the bright grass. The elders did not let them in, not out of fear, but out of respect, as if standing on the edge of a pillarless temple. Someone suggested stretching a rope around the field, planting stakes, and hanging bells, so that if they touched them, the bells would ring. The blacksmith poured hot iron, bent it into small bells that rang as clear as a needle dropping. That night, the bells did not ring. In the morning, the rope was still stretched, but right in the center of a new circle, there was another small circle, round like someone's wedding ring lost in the straw, shiny as if it had just been polished. An old woman told her daughter-in-law, "Bring me a handful of salt." She held the salt, stood at the doorway, and looked toward the field. She sprinkled the salt like falling stars. "Let whoever can go home," she said. The wind blew a few grains of salt up, sparkling like singing insects. At night, the wind blew the smell of salt into the kitchen, making the pot of soup taste salty like the sea even though the water was just well water. The old woman chuckled softly, "Salt knows its way." In the midst of those nights, there was a time when light came not from above but from below. The rice in the center rose up, like a large open hand. The pale, thin green light drifted a notch further and then died. The drumbeat on the ground changed its rhythm, tum, 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 quick as footsteps. The child by the window was breathing heavily. His mother put her hand on his chest and coaxed him, "Go to sleep." But that night, the child's dream was not full of human figures, but of circles upon circles, swirling deep like the eye of a storm. In that dream, a voice far away spoke in a language without words, "Don't be afraid of circles. Circles are the way back." One afternoon, the farmer found a small footprint in the outermost circle, and next to it a faint mud print in the shape of a child's hand. "Children are breaking in," someone shouted softly, angry at the intrusion of the mystery. But the children of the village stood in line, holding out their hands for the adults to see. Their hands were clean, smelling of sweat and sun. There was no smell of the night. The other handprint was smaller than the youngest. The wind suddenly rose, the rice rustled as if to say, "There are hands that do not belong to age." A traveler passed through the village, a basket on his shoulder, his cloak covered with dust. He stopped at a tea shop to buy a cup of hot tea. People asked him if he had ever seen those circular prints before. He laughed, his silver beard quivering slightly. "I have seen similar breaths in the desert, where the sand draws lines that no one sees at noon but everyone can read at night. I have seen them in the snow, where the reindeer leave behind a pattern like fish bones. But here there is a heartbeat." He put down his teacup, his ear tilted as if listening to music. "And this beat knows its name. The next night, the traveler spread his clothes on the edge of the field, lying still, like a shadow stretched out. He opened his eyes in the darkness, letting the night enter like a stream. When the drumming underground began, he whispered a few ancient words, not to open the door, but to keep it from closing. In the distance, a green light appeared, then another, like a swarm of fireflies in flood season spreading across the water. The lights did not turn, did not fly, they moved in circles, in the rhythm of tum, 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 like drawing a psalm with light. In the morning, there was another strange symbol in the field, a large circle embracing three smaller circles, connected by narrow corridors of rice-like belts. The traveler left the village before the sun rose, without accepting any money or saying goodbye. People only saw him stop at the end of the dirt road, touch his chest as if touching an invisible seal, and then go. The blind old man lit a lamp in front of the door, not to light himself, but to let them know the way. They, that night, walked through the cabbage garden, making the shadow of each round leaf rounder. His cat stretched its back, its tail raised like a question. It walked to the edge of the smallest circle and sat. Just like a letter placed in the right place on a page. When the rooster crowed, it still sat there, eyes open as if keeping a secret in its golden pupils. The village began to learn to whisper more softly, so that the wind would not have to strain to carry too heavy words. The mother taught her children to walk around the edge of the field, not to cut across. The blacksmith put down his hammer early and stood looking at the field for a long time before going home. The missing torchbearer's wife walked to the edge of the field, untied her old wedding veil and tied it to a bamboo pole, leaving the white cloth trembling like a bird unable to fly, then turned back. The next day, the veil lay in the middle of the largest circle, flat as if it had just been ironed, without dust or dew. One night, the west wind blew, carrying the scent of the island from somewhere far away. The rice fields tilted like a group of people bowing. And amid the familiar tum-tum-tum sound, suddenly another sound appeared, a thin vibration like the sound of a very long string being gently plucked. That sound made the hair on the back of the listener stand up, not because of fear, but because he realized he was remembering something that did not belong to the mind, but to the blood. The blind old man tilted his ear, tears welling up in the corners of his cloudy eyes. Ah! The name, he said, the night is calling the name of the fields, and the fields respond. After that night, a strange thing happened. Circles appeared not only in the rice fields, but also on the surface of the village pond in the early morning, when the dew had not yet evaporated. The water surface, as smooth as a newborn baby's skin, suddenly had circular, concentric ripples, not caused by any pebbles thrown. They appeared, expanded, then disappeared, leaving behind the sunlight broken like tiny pieces of mirror. The fish in the pond swam in circles, not scattered as before. The children stood watching, suddenly silent, as if hearing a fairy tale told to themselves in water. Rumors from other villages began to pass by with the salt merchant and the fish carrier. There was a field painted with a six-pointed star, there, a pattern like the wheels of a god's cart. But the village kept its own silence, a silence as thick as a winter sweater, as soft as the chalk dust on a butterfly's wing. People did not boast, did not compare, did not travel far to see, they stayed, waiting for the night, as if waiting for a distant relative to come home and knock with the familiar rhythm. Then one morning, the mist stretched like a silver curtain that was hard to break. When the sun pierced a small hole in that curtain, the golden light fell on the field like coins scattered for children. And there, in the middle of the gold, was a strange drawing never seen before, a large drawn not with straight lines, but with countless small circles swirling together, forming a pupil, the pupil surrounding the dark pupil, a patch of unrolled rice. Anyone who looked into that I felt smaller, as if standing before an ancient stone door at the end of an unnamed road. The child looked up for so long that his mother had to pull his hand. He breathed softly, "This I can see at night." His mother asked, "Which night?" He answered, still not taking his eyes off, "The night before we were born." The man who had told him to ring the bell, this time kept quiet, put the bell down, hung it on the porch, so that when the wind blew, the bell would ring at mealtime. The wind came, the bells rang, the sound was as thin as a needle touching stone, ting, ting. And people were surprised to realize that the rhythm of the bells matched the familiar tum, tum, tum rhythm of the underground. The two rhythms overlapped, like two strangers who had just realized that they shared a very distant family name. It was a moonless night, the sky was as dark as ink that had not been stirred in the water. The whole village was awake, without appointment. They sat on the doorstep, or stood by the fence, or leaned their foreheads against the porch pillars. In the darkness, their eyes were embers, not burning, just simmering. When the underground drums started, everyone heard them, and everyone breathed in unison, without anyone telling them to. That night circle appeared very slowly, like the careful handwriting of an old person. In the morning, the rice bent into a double helix, connecting the old circles together, as if someone standing in the center would find the way thanks to the thread. The child, for the first time, entered the field as the sun rose. He did not walk on the rice, he walked on the spaces between the circles, as if on invisible paths for light feet. He came to the center of the big eye, and stood still. The wind was still. The birds were still. Even the bell on the porch was waiting. He put both hands on the ground. The ground was cold and damp, as if someone's cheek had just shed a tear. He closed his eyes, and in the now disappearing night of that afternoon, he heard a sentence very clearly, "Sleep. When you sleep, I will continue writing." The child stood up, walked back, leaving behind him a footprint lighter than the wind's. The villagers looked at him, without asking any questions. The blind old man smiled toothlessly, the first reader. No one laughed, everyone understood that the word read here had nothing to do with words. That evening, a woman brought her old violin out onto the porch. She played a long note, the strings trembling like water hitting rocks. The note fell into the field, breaking into hundreds of small circles on the surface of the pond. The drums on the ground retreated a beat, allowing the strings to advance. For the first time, there was a duet between wood and earth, between fields and houses. Children laughed and slept. Adults breathed softly. The cat stopped watching the words, jumped down to the door frame. Curled up, its dream must have been full of fluff and circles. In the days that followed, the circles became less frequent, not because the mystery was exhausted, but because the story had told enough for the present. The field still rustled, but the words in the wind were less urgent. People returned to their work, harvesting, threshing, drying, storing. But their hands were no longer as hasty as before, the pause between two sickle strokes was longer, like the silence between two musical notes. One afternoon, the clouds were low, the fields were quiet. At the edge of the village, there was a 3-beat knock on the old wooden door, knock, knock, knock. The woman opened the door, no one. Under the threshold, an oil lamp was neatly placed, with a new wick, unlit. She brought it in and placed it on the altar. That night, she lit it. The flame rose gently like the breathing of a newborn baby. And when she slept, the flame did not go out. In the morning, the wick was still as long as before, the oil was still full. People called it the fire of the circle, the fire brought back from the spiral, the field. From then on, occasionally appeared a new circle, without warning, without explanation. Each time, the village was quiet, listening, and sleeping soundly for another night. The torch keeper from years ago did not return, but one morning, his wife found the old torch leaning against the wall of the house, where no one had placed it. On the body of the torch, there were burning marks forming 3 faint rings, like the fingerprints of time, the season of changing leaves. The wind changed places. The smell of soil mixed with the smell of newly cut straw. In a good sleep, the child dreamed of a field far away. There were also circles, but circles made of cloud shadows. He smiled in his dream. On the porch, the wind chimes rang, tink. Tink, as if in agreement, the village fields were still there. Heavy with gold in the sun, soft with green in the rain. Every night, they breathed evenly. When someone passed by the edge of the field and softly called his name, the wind would call back that name, carrying it up high, weaving it into the middle of the circles, so that tomorrow, when someone bowed their head in the field, they would hear their voice echoing back, carried as lightly as a young strand of rice shaking in a child's hand. Night covered the fields like a giant black shawl, hiding all paths and sounds. The full moon returned, brighter, larger, as if it had come close to the ground to see every vortex in the rice fields. The old circles were deeply engraved, unfading, connecting with new ones, like a secret map woven from the patience of the wind and an invisible hand. In that darkness, the child dreamed again. He saw himself standing in the center of the giant eye, surrounded by swirling circles like ocean waves. But this time, the ground beneath his feet was not cold but warm, like a giant heartbeat beating from the ground. From afar, a group of dark shadows approached, no clear shape, just vague figures. Each step making the wind spin. A voice rang out, not in human language, but in the sound of wind, rice, and cracked earth. We have sown. You are the harvest. He woke up with a start, cold sweat sticking to his forehead. But outside, the wind was still whispering, and the fields were still rustling as if lulling them to sleep. The mother put her hand on her chest, coaxing, "The night is only for dreams. Don't be afraid." But in the child's eyes, there was still a green light like smoldering ashes. The next day, the villagers went out to the fields, because the rumor had spread before the rooster crowed. A new circle had just appeared, but this time it was not just a circular pattern, but a whole shape, a giant bird spreading its wings, each feather drawn from the rice stalks lying flat, the lines as sharp as the carvings of a god. Its head was facing north, its wings spread wide, as if ready to fly away from the ground. The old man muttered, "The guiding bird," but said nothing more. The traveler had left, but people still talked about him, as if the circles were the answer to what he had not yet said. Some believed that he was not a guest, but someone sent to wake him up. But then silence fell, as if the land itself was telling them not to ask any more questions. At night, when the rice bird was still shining under the moonlight, someone heard the sound of wings flapping in the sky. It was not the sound of an ordinary bird, but the sound of 1,000 wings flapping together, flowing over the roof, making the dogs howl and then fall silent. No one dared to open the door, just sat shivering under the oil lamp, listening to the wind drift away, leaving a heavy silence. In the morning, the bird's feathers were scattered all over the fields, not real feathers, but silvery white rice stalks, shining like metal. The farmer picked them up, his hands trembling. The rice stalks did not break, did not wither, but were as cold as winter river water. Whoever held them dreamed of spinning fields, dreamed of endless roads. People gathered them up, put them in jars, and locked them up, afraid that the strange light would leak out of the village. The blind old man heard the story and just laughed hoarsely. How can you keep the wind? How can you keep the circle? Everything finds its way back to its place. Then he listened in silence. Tonight there will be a different rhythm. Indeed, when the moon rose, the familiar tum-tum sound changed to tum-tum-ta, like a practice song. The children woke up with a start, but instead of crying, they smiled in their dreams. The adults heard the sound, both afraid and at peace, as if they had just been embraced. A young man in the village, curious and brave, decided to step into the bird circle. He walked through each bent rice strand, stepping on the rice stalk as if walking on waves. When he reached the center, he stood, looking up at the sky. At that moment, the wind blew down strongly, blowing his hair and clothes in disarray. From the ground, a green light shot up, embracing his body, then suddenly disappeared. When people ran to him, he had fallen, his eyes open but no longer visible. In the palm of his hand he held a grain of something that sparkled like a drop of dew that did not dissolve. People took it away, but the grain dissolved into the air, leaving only the smell of the sea breeze. After that night, the circles stopped appearing for a while. The fields returned to peace, as if tired after a long song. The people were both happy and worried, happy because they were at peace, worried because the silence was like the waiting period between two storms. They worked, harvested, mended houses, but every time they looked up at the sky, their gazes lengthened by a beat. Then, one night when the monsoon blew, people saw a strange light covering the whole sky, blue, red, purple, like a great embroidered cloth spreading from one horizon to the other. In that light, the earth trembled again, and from the next morning, a new vortex appeared, larger than all the previous ones. Embracing the old patterns, as if writing another chapter in the invisible book of the earth, the old man sighed, the story is not finished. We have only read the first page. The mist fell thickly like silver threads falling from the sky, weaving the fields into a hazy cloth. In that mist, the giant vortex that had just appeared was not only on the ground, but also seemed to float in the air, like a shadow of itself hanging in the air. The villagers stood from afar, their hearts beating fast, because they saw the light circles overlapping the rice circles, rotating gently, as if someone was embroidering on two pieces of cloth at the same time. One was the earth, the other was the sky. The child was the first to approach. He walked slowly, each step as if being led by someone. When he stood at the edge of the vortex, his eyes opened wide, reflecting the silent rotating light. He heard a call, not from outside but from within his chest, "Come here." The child raised his hand, his tiny hand touching the empty space. The mist parted, the light circle vibrated, then disappeared. But on the palm of his hand, there was clearly imprinted a small, round mark, faintly bright like moonlight shining on pebbles. The mother ran to her child, holding her child, but the mark did not wash away, nor did it fade. That night, the whole village did not sleep. They lit a fire at the edge of the field, small sparks like fox eyes lurking in the bushes. People sat in a circle, recounting each memory of the past swirl marks, the night with the sound of drums, the night with birds. The night with the light of the blue sea. Each person spoke, their voice trembling, as if they were reading a wordless sutra. Children lay on their mothers' laps, asleep, but still moving to the rhythm of the tum-tum underground. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the ground shook. Not violently, just like a long breath, rising from deep within the earth. The bells hanging on the porches rang together, all in unison, without missing a beat. The sound rang far away, echoing like thousands of simultaneous knocks on doors. The fields lit up, the old whirlpools glowed again, connecting together in an endless chain, like a giant snake winding in the rice. The blind old man, his eyes milky white, raised his face to the sky, his lips trembling as he said, "The door is open," and indeed, right in the middle of the largest whirlpool, the earth was no longer earth. It became a dark mirror, so deep that it had no bottom. People looked into it, saw a second sky, not like the real sky, but a sky full of constellations never seen before. Children were startled, old people covered their eyes, but no one turned their backs. In that mirror, the stars rotated, then gathered into a familiar symbol, the symbol of the whirlpools on the fields. A young woman, drawn by the image, unconsciously stepped forward, placing her foot in the center. Her feet sank as if stepping into water, but did not get wet. People shouted, but she turned back and smiled, her face strangely bright. "It is not an abyss, but a path." Then, in a breath, she disappeared, leaving only the sound of a strong whirlwind, and the mirror closed. Returning to the old rice fields, the whole village was silent. Her husband knelt down, crying, but no one knew how to comfort him. The blind old man only whispered, "The one who is called must go. No one can stop him." That night, the fire on everyone's porch burned higher, as if an invisible hand had poured more oil. The bell rang softly, softly, like a farewell. The child looked at the light mark on his hand, whispering in his dream, "Not lost. Just changed place." The next morning, the rice fields were as calm as if nothing had happened. But from the distant sky, a flock of black birds flew by, forming a giant spiral, casting their shadows on the ground. The whole village looked up, no one spoke, only hearing in their hearts the familiar beat of a drum, tum, 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 and in the wind, there was a whisper, "It's not the end. It's just the beginning." The next night fell, the moon was almost completely swallowed by dark clouds, leaving only a faint light as thin as a silver hair. The whole village was silent, people did not dare to light torches, nor sing lullabies to their children, because in the air there was an unusual murmur, not the tum-tum like every night, but a rhythm stacked on many layers, as if hundreds of hearts were beating underground. The children were sleeping soundly, but all of them burst into tears in the middle of the night, their eyes wide open but seeing nothing, their mouths whispering words that no one understood. The mother hugged her child, holding him tightly, but felt his body tremble as if listening to a long song from somewhere far away. In the dark earthen house, the wind chimes rang by themselves, ringing out long like a sobbing song. In the fields, the rice was lying down, not forming a circle, not forming a shape, but spreading out into a straight path, leading from the edge of the field to the center of the giant vortex before. That path was softly lit, as if there were thousands of fireflies lined up along it without blinking. The villagers gathered, surprised, afraid, no one dared to step. Then the child with the round mark on his hand stepped forward. No one had time to stop him, he walked on that bright path as if he were walking home. When he approached the center of the circle, the earth trembled, the mirror of the night before opened again, dark, swallowing the surrounding light. The child did not jump down, nor did he stop, he just sat down on the edge, placing his bright hand on the mirror. Immediately, the star rings in the mirror swirled strongly, converging into a large symbol never seen before, a tree with countless round branches, each branch a circle, intertwined into the shape of the tree of life. The old man knelt down on the ground, whispering, "The roots have been revealed." From the mirror, a light rose, light but spreading far, dyeing the whole village a silvery blue color. In that light, people saw the shadows of the dead, the torchbearer, the woman who had disappeared last night, and even the shadows of unknown strangers, standing among each other, looking towards the village with calm eyes. No one cried, no one called, because everyone understood that it was not a return, but a promise. We are still here. The light faded, the mirror closed, leaving the child sitting still, eyes closed. When the mother ran to her, holding her child in her arms, the child opened his eyes and whispered, "They taught me a song. But it is not time to sing yet." The mark on his hand glowed brighter, then faded like embers in the ashes. From that day on, the field did not produce another whirlpool for many weeks. But everyone knew that the silence was not the end, but only a sigh before a new chapter. The village bells still rang by themselves, the wind still whispered, and every night people lay listening to the tum-tum rhythm in their chests, like a response from the faraway earth. The last night of the season, the rain poured down like 100,000 needles, but the fields did not sink, but shone like silver mirrors. In the sound of the rain, some people clearly heard the sound of giant wings flapping to the north, others heard footsteps walking around the village, and the child smiled in his sleep, whispering, "The story is not over, it has just begun to open a page." the harvest season had come, the golden sheaves of rice were gathered into large mounds, but no one in the village felt as peaceful as every year. They harvested in silence, their eyes always glancing at the old swirls that had now turned brown, but were still deeply engraved in the ground like scars that could not be erased. When the sickle cut into the rice, the sound was dry, different from the usual joyful cheers, as if the ground was remembering their every move. At night, the granaries were full but people's hearts were empty. The familiar tum-tum sound now mixed with a strange metallic sound, like a giant bell striking in the deep sea. The wind chimes on the eaves shook violently, overlapping each other, creating a chaotic melody. The old people whispered, "The tree has grown more branches." No one understood, but everyone saw that the circles had become a living symbol, no longer a silent trace on the field. One afternoon, the dark clouds gathered, the sky was as dark as dusk, even though the sun had not yet set. On the background of the clouds, straight streaks of light appeared, shining down on the field, forming silver pillars. The field trembled like waves. People saw in that light, the rice no longer bent down but grew unusually high, higher than a person's head, the tops curved, arranged into arches. The child with the light mark on his hand stood at the entrance of the village, staring at the pillars of light. He held his mother's hand and said softly, "They are calling me to come over." The mother cried, holding her child tightly, but her small hand flashed, so hot that she let go. The child walked, each step as light as if it did not touch the ground, into the bright gate. As he entered, the wind rose fiercely, but did not blow anyone down, but only swirled, pulling dust particles, dry leaves, and even the cries of birds, blending into a strange melody. The child disappeared into the light, and when the light died down, he had disappeared. Only new swirls remained, drawn on the fields like a book opening more pages. The whole village knelt down, not out of fear, but because they felt that something sacred was beyond their reach. The blind old man whispered, "The tree has chosen the seed. The wind will carry it away." That night, the sky had no moon, but was filled with long streaks of light like rivers flowing between the clouds. They meandered, connecting from horizon to horizon, and for a brief moment, everyone saw, the swirls in the field were not meaningless, but fragments of a giant picture, stretching from earth to sky. The villagers did not sleep. They sat together, listening to the wind sing, listening to the earth breathe, and for the first time, they were not afraid. Because deep down, everyone knew, they were just small notes, but they had been woven into the song of an invisible hand. Winter came, covering the roofs with white frost, covering every fence and branch with ice. The field slept under a thin layer of snow, but the swirls were still clearly visible, as if carved into the pure white fabric of the earth and sky. The villagers walked on the snow, their footprints forming short paths, then disappearing when the wind blew. But the swirls did not dissolve, shining dimly under the moonlight like silver scars. In the long night, when every roof was immersed in small fires and kitchen smoke, someone heard a call echoing from the distant fields. It was no longer tum-tum, but a long song, many voices singing together, soaring high and then sinking low like the waves of a distant ocean. The mother who had lost her child quietly opened the door, following the sound, not caring about the cold wind. The next morning, people found her footprints leading straight into the fields, stopping in the middle of the largest circle, then disappearing, without a trace of return. The villagers began to understand that the swirls were not just traces, but doors. A door that no one closed, only opened for those who were called. And so, one by one, people quietly disappeared, leaving no tears, no drops of blood, only the wind that shivered gently on the rice grass sleeping under the snow and ice. One night, the blind old man sat on the porch, his aged face turned toward the fields. He sang hoarsely, a song that no one knew the name of, just like a call echoing into the night. When he finished singing, he stood up, walked slowly but surely, toward the fields. People did not stop him, just watched. And then he disappeared into the thick fog, never to return. When spring comes, the snow melts, the young shoots break the ground. The fields are green again, the rice grows tall again. But in the middle of the fields, the swirls are still there, as clear as the first day, and on them grows a strange grass, with slender stems, silver leaves, sparkling when the wind blows. The villagers do not pull them out, do not dare to touch them, only stand from afar, bowing their heads as if before an altar. People say that at night, the grass hums, vibrates like a string. The song spreads throughout the valley, making the animals quiet, making the children sleep full of dreams of bright doors, of spiral paths leading to the distant sky. And whoever listens for a long time will see, the song does not come from the grass alone, but from the very ground, from the very sky, blending together. One day, a group of strange visitors came to the village, bringing with them curious eyes and a flurry of questions. But when they set foot in the fields, seeing the swirl stretching out like an ancient letter written in the wind, they fell silent. The villagers did not tell, did not explain, only smiled, because they knew, there are things that cannot be conveyed through words, can only be heard with the heart in the quiet night. That night, the full moon rose again, shining brightly like a silver tray. The silver grass sang a long song, the wind blew, and in a moment, the whole sky was filled with swirls of light rotating in sync with the circle on the ground. The village was immersed in silver light, quiet as in a dream. And everyone understood, this story is not about loss, but about a journey far, farther than any shore humans have ever known. The sky that night was like a giant mirror, reflecting the vortexes on the fields, connecting the earth and the sky into one. When the light gradually faded, the village fell into silence again, but somewhere, people felt the space had just expanded, as if the small village was no longer standing still in the old valley, but had entered an invisible map, where all roads led to a strange land, that disappeared, seemingly far away, but strangely, they appeared in the dreams of those who remained. The mother who lost her child saw the child smiling in her sleep, standing in the middle of the bright silver fields where there was neither day nor night. The blind old man appeared in the blacksmith's dream. His eyes had returned to light, sitting beside a rushing river of light, singing a song without words. The young woman who had entered the mirror that night held a bundle of silver rice in her hand, holding it high like a lamp, guiding the shadows that followed. Those who stayed behind were both afraid and relieved, because deep down, they understood, no one was truly gone, everyone was just continuing on a path with no turning back. Then one night, the wind changed direction, carrying a strange scent, not the scent of damp soil or young rice, but the scent of the distant sea, salty and cold. The whole village woke up, looking towards the horizon. There, a blue halo opened, silently rotating, shining down like a giant door hanging in midair. From within, people saw the shadows of unfamiliar mountain ranges, saw rivers of rolling light, saw giant black birds flying in vortexes. The child with the circle on his hand was no longer in the village, but his voice echoed in everyone's mind, "Remember, we are the harvest." As soon as that whisper was heard, the fields beneath their feet were ablaze, the rice was bent into rows, each golden ear turning to silver, throwing light into the sky, as if to answer the call. The villagers knelt down, not out of fear, but because they knew they had been chosen to witness. They understood that this moment would come back, would repeat itself, until the final vortex was completed and the door opened forever, and from that night on, people stopped calling those circles miracles. They whispered to each other, "That is the letter of heaven." A letter that no one had yet read, a prayer that no one had yet sung, but all had been written before, by an invisible hand spread across the fields, under the sky, and in every heartbeat. On the other side of the door, there was no land, no sky as people knew it. There was only an endless sea of light, where the swirls spread out like giant flowers, overlapping each other to form a winding path that went on forever. Those who had disappeared from the village were walking on that path, their footsteps as light as a glide, leaving no shadow or trace. The mother who had once held her child now saw him walking ahead of her, smiling brightly, her hand raised high to lead the way. The blind old man no longer relied on his cane. His eyes shining like two stars, his hoarse singing voice of the past now turned into a strong echo, supporting everyone. The young woman with the silver sheaf of rice still walked among the group, like a lamp that never went out, illuminating every turn of the swirling path. Around them, the air was not quiet, but filled with the familiar rhythms, the tum, tum, now resounding, blending into a giant song. They did not listen with their ears, but with their bones, with their flesh and blood, with their heartbeats. And everyone understood, they too were becoming part of that song. In the distance, at the end of the path of light, a giant tree rose up, its trunk twisted with spirals, its roots deep in the darkness, its branches reaching up to strange constellations. On each branch, there were hanging balls of light like small suns, in each ball was a rotating world. Anyone who looked at it saw the silhouettes of fields, of villages, of themselves in them, but not in the present. But like thousands of pieces of mirrors reflecting the past, the group stopped under the tree. They were silent, listening. From the tree trunk came a voice, not human in form, not in tone, but the voice of the earth, of the wind, of the water, all in one. You have passed through. You are the seed. Lie down in me, to grow into a new branch. The young woman carried the silver sheaf of rice and stepped forward, placing the sheaf at the base of the tree. Immediately, the earth opened up, swallowed the sheaf, and from there grew a bright branch, spreading out, extending into the distant heavens. The child laughed loudly, pointed to the new branch, and spoke a language that no one understood. But all heard in their hearts, the road is not over. This is only the beginning. The group knelt down, bowed their heads, and in that moment, they melted into the light, becoming part of the vortex, blending into the branches, leaves, and fruits, disappearing like dewdrops into the ocean. In the old village, in the middle of the yellowing rice fields, people still heard singing, still saw new vortexes growing. But they were no longer afraid. Because they knew, somewhere, in that cosmic vortex, their flesh and blood and souls had become an endless song, still singing forever to the earth and sky. The giant vortex stood tall in the middle of the sea of light, like a pillar connecting the deep abyss and the distant sky. Its trunk was not made of wood, but of overlapping circles, twisted together, sparkling like thousands of mirrors rotating endlessly. Each circle seemed to contain a song, a dream, a soul that had passed through. When the wind blew, the tree shook, and from it came a great echo, making the whole space vibrate like the beat of an ancient drum. On the branches, the glowing orbs radiated gold, silver, green, and red like little suns. In each orb, one could see images of different worlds, an endless grassland, an ancient stone city, a bottomless sea, even the swirling rice fields in their village. It was as if each orb was a realm, each branch a path, and all converged into the swirling trunk. The child who had once worn the circle on his hand had become a small light, hovering beside a young branch. It smiled, its eyes sparkling, and then it spoke in a clear voice, "This is the source of the circles. Every trace on the ground is but an echo of the branch, but a shadow of the fruit. All the fields lead back here." The young woman with the silver sheath had now merged with the branch, her face faintly reflected in the swirling body, gentle as moonlight in the wind. She whispered, "We do not disappear. We are rewritten." And from the branch where she had melted into, countless small circles spread out, spreading like silver raindrops, sowing into the sea of light, and then falling into distant worlds. The blind old man now stood upright, his eyes wide open, shining like two torches. He looked up at the treetop, where the swirling light was most intense, and softly said, "This is the first letter, and also the last. Every swirl is a word in the endless sutra." Then he began to sing. But this time it was no longer hoarse, but a clear, far-reaching sound, penetrating the layers of light, vibrating the globe hanging on the branch. And strangely, the globe shook to the rhythm of his singing, spinning, opening, revealing a space inside that led to a new land, a vast green meadow, where there was no darkness, only soft light and singing wind. The group that had dissolved into the vortex now reappeared. Entering that meadow, but no longer in their old form, but as gentle shadows, like brilliant dewdrops. They did not speak, did not cry, did not laugh, only immersed themselves in the music spreading from the tree roots. In that moment, the giant whirlwind tree shuddered, its branches stretched farther, its fruit shone brighter, and from there, countless new whirlwinds began to fall on other worlds, continuing to sow miracles on the fields, on the sand, on the snow, on the sea. In the old village, in the middle of the rice fields, the villagers saw a new whirlwind growing after the winter, more delicate, more radiant. They knelt down, put their hands on the ground, and heard a singing voice echoing from far away. And in their sleep, each person saw themselves walking among the whirlwind branches of the giant tree, walking in a sea of light, with no boundary between dream and reality. The story is not over yet. Because the whirlwind tree still hides the secret of its top, where the light gathers, where the last circles are waiting to open, revealing what no one dares to name. the top of the whirlwind tree stretched so high that the eyes could not reach, like a spear piercing the sky. The light from there was not as gentle as the moonlight, nor as bright as the sun, but a pure, sharp white light, making anyone who looked at it for a long time feel like they were dissolving into nothingness. The branches below the tree whispered like a choir, but from the top came an absolute silence, so quiet that it drowned out the wind, the singing, and the ancient tum-tum rhythm. Those who had merged with the tree felt that call. In her dream, the mother who had lost her child saw a spiral path leading straight up, without turning or turning. The blind old man heard the drumbeat turn into a giant heartbeat, urging him to step forward. The young woman saw her hands glowing, holding a sheaf of eternal silver rice, like a lamp to light the way. The child with the round mark saw the light in his hand turn into a key that turned, fitting the path to the top of the tree. And then, they began to climb. Not with their feet, not with their hands, but with their own heartbeats in sync with the vortex. Each beat took them higher, each breath added another circle to the tree trunk. They climbed on and on, through the spheres of light that held countless worlds, past the branches where countless souls had transformed into grass, into wind, into water. Finally, they reached the place where the treetop opened like a giant flower. In the middle of the flower was a circular space, rotating silently, without light, without darkness, just an infinite void. Looking into it, one felt oneself disappear, saw all the cycles of life, all the vortexes as just a small hum in an endless song. The child raised his hand with the circle mark, reaching toward that space. The light mark on his hand merged with the vortex, and for the first time, the space made a sound. Not the sound of drums, not the singing, but a whisper like the wind through the grass. Every whirlpool returns to me. I am the first, and also the last. Whoever passes through here will have no name, no form, but will become the rhythm of the song itself. The young woman bent down, dropping the silver sheaf of rice into the whirlpool. It dissolved into millions of bright grains, falling down all over the branches, sowing seeds for countless worlds. The blind old man stepped forward, smiling, letting his bright eyes dissolve into two small stars, hanging at the edge of the whirlpool. The mother held her child in her arms, then melted into the light with her child, no longer distinguishing between mother and child. Only a long song remained. Finally, the child stood alone. He heard the call, not far, not near, but everywhere. He smiled, and stepped into the empty vortex. In an instant, the entire whirlwind tree shuddered, its entire body shining, thousands of spheres ringing like bells. And then, the tree's top bloomed, releasing countless rays of light that flew across the world. Below the earth, on the fields, new circles appeared simultaneously, on the rice fields, on the white snow, on the yellow sand, on the blue sea. Everywhere bore the mark of the whirlpool, like an ancient song that had just been written. The ancient villagers saw, and they understood. The tree had opened its top, the last circle had rung, and from now on, the song no longer belonged to one place, one person, but to the entire universe. From the day the whirlwind tree's top bloomed and emitted its last light, the world changed. The fields were no longer simply places to sow rice, to harvest rice, but had become pages of a cosmic scripture. Each season, new, more elaborate vortices appear on the ground, following each other like chapters in an endless book of heaven. The ancient villagers are no longer complete. Many have passed through the circle of light, merging with the tree, leaving only a few sparse roofs where the wind whistles. But no one is afraid, because those who remain know that they are only the keepers of the fire, watching over the legend so that it does not die out. Children born after the night the tree opens all bear small marks on their skin, sometimes on the hands, sometimes on the forehead, sometimes below the ankles. When they grow up, their eyes often look up to the sky, as if remembering a lost song. Through generations, the village's story is no longer a private memory. Passing merchants heard it and wrote it down in smudged ink. Travelers stopped, listened to the wind singing in the fields, and brought the words back to other lands. Gradually, in faraway lands, people whispered about the letters of heaven, about the swirls that no one wrote or read. Some people turned the legend into a curse, that whoever steps into the swirl will disappear, never to return. Others called it a blessing, that entering the swirl is to hear an eternal song, to escape the cycle of worldly dust. People built small shrines in the middle of the fields, planted bundles of dry rice like incense, and prayed silently on windy nights. The prayers did not ask for a good harvest, did not ask for warmth and comfort, but only hoped to hear a song from afar. Then, centuries passed, the old village disappeared, the roofs melted into the weeds, leaving only the endless swirling fields. New generations discovered it, bowed their heads before the circles deeply engraved in the ground, not knowing where they came from. They call it mysterious traces, miracle signs, ghost whirlpools. But in the wind, if one really listens, one can still hear the tum-tum sound, the heartbeat of the earth, ringing as it has since the beginning, and in the distance, the giant whirlwind tree still stands, stretching its branches into infinity. Carrying within it the souls that have turned into light, still singing until the end of eternity. The story ends here, not with a closing word, but with a song that still rings, like the wind lulling the fields, like the moon shining on the water, forever unending.